I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call the Ed Gein Trilogy. In 1957, a hardware store owner named Bernice Warden disappeared. An investigation into Bernice's disappearance led authorities to the farm of Ed Gein, a local recluse. At the farm, Bernice's body was found, fatally shot and decapitated with her insides removed. Deeper investigation showed that Gein's home was filled with household items, clothing, and masks, all created using human body parts and flesh. This true account of the infamous killer became the basis for several books and films. Today we're going to be taking a dive into 3 films that were all inspired by the gruesome actions of Ed Gein. We all go a little mad sometimes. Marion Crane is on the run after stealing $40,000 from her employer. Taking the back roads in an effort to avoid the police, Marion pulls off to a small motel and takes cinema's most infamous shower. Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh star in the Alfred Hitchcock classic Psycho from 1960. Sally and Franklin Hardesty take a van full of friends down memory lane to visit the Hardesty family homestead. Instead, they encounter a different family, one with a love of bone sculptures, human taxidermy, and, of course, chainsaws. This is Tobe Hooper's 1974 classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Quid pro quo. Clarice Starling, an FBI trainee, is dispatched to interview the notorious serial killer and brilliant psychiatrist Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter. Her goal? To find out if by some cosmically improbable coincidence Lecter knows Buffalo Bill. Anthony Hopkins stars alongside Jodie Foster in the film that won the Big 5 Academy Awards, Jonathan Demme's Silence of the Lambs from 1991. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Hello and welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster, and with me as always is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
Hi, how's it going? Doing okay.
Doing okay. I'm doing well as well. Just moved into a new place, trying to figure out all the decor around the house as we are moving in, and I guess we're leaning toward now human bone furniture and lamps made of faces.
I was wondering where you're going with that one. Yeah.
Stuffed birds everywhere, just stuffed birds in every room.
Exactly, yeah. So we're gonna watch talk about a couple nice films, and we have a special guest with us today, a repeat guest from the Dark Side of Trek episode, Adam Feuerberg. How are you, sir?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing great. How are you guys? Thanks for having me. This is so wonderful.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
I feel like I am back. I really am, and I have the two of you to thank.
I'm honored. Yeah. So you came
I need
up...
more thanking. Keep going.
Yeah. I was gonna say probably one.
Well, you always smell good, and you sound like this voice. The sound of your voices is always very soothing. I listen to the show more for just for comfort, not so much for content.
We smell great over Google Hangout, but
you really do. You really
do.
You oddly smell just like my place. It's really, yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to keep a little commonality between you and I.
Exactly.
So you came up with today's block. You had a special name for today's block, and I'd love for you to introduce that.
So we were bouncing some ideas, and at first we started with, why don't we do the Psycho movies? And then it kind of changed into the Ed Gein trilogy. It went from there, which I'm really glad that we did that, because I hadn't seen a couple of these movies in a minute. Actually allowed me to bust out my Criterion Collection DVD version that I think I ordered used. I think I did that used like 15 years ago on Amazon. And it was, nice. Before we knew that it was a gigantic evil corporation. It was just a place to get Criterion used movies, with the eye logo. Remember the old eye logo?
Yeah.
Like it was in the cool, it was just like an eyeball. And they had no money to pay for this. And they chose, all right, fine, just we'll sketch an eye. That'll be the logo, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they turned into the greatest DVD company in the world. And they put the reason why I wanted to get this, it's the Silence of the Lambs one, is the third movie of the group. I wanted to get this one because the Silence of the Lambs DVDs that they put out after this, off the Criterion because it was limited, they didn't have any of the audio commentaries. Like they have commentary with everybody on their own from the movie, and it's really, it was a real nerd moment for me when I had this. I definitely came to all 5 of them. It was fantastic.
I also watched Silence of the Lambs through Criterion, but through the app. And they've got an entire block of 70s horror movies, and that was one of them that were on there from the Halloween stuff.
Yes, yeah. They promote that all the time online. It's fantastic.
They also put together some excellent film blocks.
Yes.
Can you tell us what this Ed Gein trilogy consists of?
Yes. So as I mentioned,
before we do that, just to let you know, like Silence of the Lambs is on Blu-ray now too, so it's back, baby.
Yes,
it's back.
Awesome. All the media. Here we go. Hopefully it'll be hologram version too. That'll be really. That would be kind of interesting to see, like that final scene, like just wearing like a VR headset. Oh man, because it really is.
Yes, exactly.
So the 3 movies are Psycho from 1960, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, which led into a fantastic franchise on its own. Then we have the 1974 Tobe Hooper movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Awesome, fantastic. In the similar way that Psycho kind of birthed the slasher genre, Texas Chainsaw set a lot of future motifs and themes and ideas and common traits that would show up in a lot of future films similar to that. And then finally close out on the psychological horror choice of the bunch, The Silence of the Lambs, released in 1991, directed by Jonathan Demme.
Awesome block. And like we were saying before, these are 3 classic movies for very, very obvious reasons. These were so good watching these again.
This is the first time I think we've had like 3 all classics, right? Like all like
this is the first time.
You know,
yeah.
Everyone has seen or heard of these movies, even if they haven't seen them. You know, and
right?
Like, they know of everything in these movies because they're so just ubiquitous in pop culture.
We're not pulling up the obscure shit in this one. This is stuff that everyone knows. Rewatching these, I probably hadn't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 10 or 15 years.
Oh wow!
At least all the way through from the beginning.
Interesting.
And I just forgot how incredibly good that movie is. Like from a cinematic standpoint, from an editing standpoint, from just an overall story. It's like a mad sequence of events that happens in the annals of history, and it was really a joy. So thank you for suggesting these.
This is just been so much fun to really just go back and throw. The first time I actually saw Texas Chainsaw was not the first time I'd seen it, but like the first time I'd seen it forever was actually at the cemetery, the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, last Halloween or like the Halloween before that. It was really quite an experience to take it in all like that. It almost felt like the first time I'd seen it, even though it wasn't. I think I saw it like years and years ago, similar to you, but like I got to have that experience, and it just blew my face off once again.
Because none of us would have been old enough to see it in a theater, and that's kind of the closest thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, that's one of those really fun movies to see in a group because it is so shocking in parts, as well as people know what's coming. And you can kind of feel that anticipation, especially when that steel door closes and Leatherface makes his first kill with a sledgehammer, and then that's it's such an iconic scene.
I hope they actually installed a synthesizer into the wall so that when the door closes, you actually hear that, like wah. Like
that's probably the most high tech thing in that
right?
household.
Yeah, that's where all the money went. Everyone else lived on $5 and fried bologna sandwiches. For
everything
else
is we're
the
just
money
gonna make a chair
door.
made of bones. Here's this plate made of fingers, and then also there's a synthesizer in the door. So let's start with obviously Ed Gein. Maybe we should do a little history on who this is, because that would make sense as to why we put these movies together.
Exactly.
So do you mind doing that, or did you want one of us to take control?
Well, I know very little about the guy, and so I'm just going to read a little bit that I've pulled up here. So it's weird how the movies kind of line up with the story of his life, because in the way that the mother in Psycho, the kind of controlling mother that never let him out of her sight, may have abused him either physically or mentally. That seems to be present in his life. He had an alcoholic father that the mother hated, but for some reason they were still together. He dies at a young age, leaving the family, and that kind of leads into Ed Gein kind of being a mama's boy, not going anywhere. It sounds like she was actually a rather abusive person. Then you lead into the different stories of his murders. Either he was known for severing parts off of people and collecting their bodies, which is something that would show up a lot more in like maybe the Texas Chainsaw than in Psycho. So that's where like the different pathologies show up. I think Psycho is the one that really discovers what the mother control could do to somebody, whereas Texas Chainsaw is more about all the horrible, brutal, gory, just mutilation. When you mutilate a body that way, that's what that movie's about. And then
trophies and whatever.
Right.
There's also the taxidermy though in Psycho too, where kept the mother around. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, taxidermy is
got
definitely
the birds
a key part.
and his mother taxidermied.
Right. Yeah. Both. Sorry. You'll practice on birds and then you'll perfect on your mother.
And then Silence of the Lambs is fantastic because while it's a horror film in its own right about a serial killer who has his own tics and everything, it's very much about the search for the killer. And again, how the first two films really discovered the two different kinds of pathologies that may have showed up. Silence of the Lambs is about discovering what those pathologies are and then knowing how to go and seek out one of these killers on one of their sprees.
And using a former killer or a current killer, actually in the movie, but a person that's incarcerated as, the person that can get into the same headspace as the killer that you're searching for.
Exactly.
Well, and he also just sort of just happened to have treated this guy.
Yeah, exactly.
At one point in time.
Moffat. Yeah.
It's the wonderful coincidence.
Clarice, come back here. His name is Buffalo Bill. Go see her now. Da, 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 da.
That was the one thing that kind of threw me off. How did he know?
Please, hang on a second. I've got all the information. Just
right. Come back here real quick. Come back here.
That was the one thing that I never quite got. How did he know that his guy was already dead? And
he knew the whole time.
He knew the whole time.
That's what you're supposed to understand is that he knows who all these killers are that are out in the world. Once he reads one story about him, it's either he's treated him or he knows someone in the business. You're like, this guy is a prolific psychiatrist.
Because that's who he was. He was the guy that intervied all of them.
Yeah. And he's the one that treated them all in the Thomas Harris narrative. Yeah, Psycho, to revisit this movie was extremely exciting. While it's a 1960 movie, it, again, feels very current. I want to bring up specifically the sequence of Arbogast in that movie as being one of my favorite sequences in any movie ever. The second that this private investigator shows up trying to find Marion Crane, and he finds... Norman Bates goes into the house, and that's that scene of him walking up those stairs and that strange deep focus or whatever the hell is on the camera at that time when he's walking
reverse
up.
Zoom, that thing.
Yes, it is. It is so like it tears up my stomach when I watch it, and then they cut to that bird's eye view of the mother of Norman coming out of the room with the knife, and man, that is still an effective scene.
What's kind of fascinating about that? So I'm actually really glad about the timing of this. If we had done this one before Trek, I wouldn't have seen the version of Psycho that I saw. So just recently, an uncut version of Psycho came out.
What?
And what? Yeah, I know. I've seen the movie, 100 times, but apparently I've never seen the movie because the version that played in the theaters that came out in 1960 was subsequently trimmed certain moments, and that was what was sort of re-released theatrically, played on television, and put out at home video for like 60 years.
Wow.
And then just a couple weeks ago, a month ago or something, the Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray of the uncut version came out.
Of Psycho.
Of Psycho.
What's different about him?
Exactly. There's something like 15 seconds of a difference, but like the three places that I remember are when Norman looks through the peephole. We see Janet Leigh start to get undressed. She starts to unhook her bra in the cup we've all seen 100 times. It would cut back to his eyeball, and then we cut back through the peephole, and she's got a robe on. In the uncut version, there's a little more of the bra coming off, and then when I thought there was something different about the shower scene, but I was like right when we first got on, I was still kind of watching them side by side just to see what it was. And the shower scene seems to be the same. The difference in the shower scene is sort of after, when Norman's like, first pulls her body out and drags her onto the shower curtain, he looks at his hands and they're bloody, and then in the version we've all seen 100 times, he is instantly sort of like washing his hands. But in the uncut version, we see his reaction to seeing his hands, and then going into the bathroom and like not knowing what to do with his hands, and then like washing them off, and like there's a little more of that moment. And then what kind of prompted this was that the other part that I noticed was after Martin Balsam falls down the stairs, we see just a knife kind of come in the top of the frame and leave through the bottom of the frame. In the version that we're all familiar with, the knife stabs once, there's kind of a scream and it fade out. But in the sort of 1960 version, he stabs like 3 times.
Oh wow!
I think I saw this version.
You mean at the bottom of the stairs, right? When he jumps on, or Norman jumps on top. Yeah.
I recently acquired a copy of the movie digitally, and this is the one that I have. What you're describing,
oh, wow.
I was
okay.
like, the other two scenes, like, wait, he did check his hands, and then now I'm like, no, she did stab him 3 times. Like, you're describing the one that I have.
I thought one of 2 things you were going to say. One of them was that there wasn't going to be such a jarring cut with Sam Loomis and Norman wrestling before Norman makes his way back to the house to meet Marion's sister to finish off the movie. There's like a weird jarring cut there when they're like wrestling.
Yeah.
I thought there was going to be more there, hoping that, yeah, exactly. It's just, And then the other one was, I thought you were going to say that the added sequence there when Norman's looking at Janet Leigh through the peephole was the Vince Vaughn version of that from the Gus Van Sant when he
when he turns into multiple Migs.
When he turns into multiple Migs, exactly.
Yeah. I've got blood on him. Look at it.
Wow, that's it's crazy to think that there is a director's cut of that movie or an uncut version of that movie now coming out.
Are you both familiar with the story of him getting the script approved of Hitchcock? So there was a copy of the script, and I don't know if it was a copy of the script or it was a copy of the movie, but the studio said no, we're not releasing this, and so he waited some time. He didn't change a thing, didn't change a single part of it. Showed it to them again, and they approved it.
Oh yeah, no, I
don't know if it was a cut of the movie or a copy of the script, but he didn't.
It was a cut of the movie, and then it was something like I thought that story was that they're like, oh, the opening scene where they're just laying around in the bed, half naked or whatever, it's too racy, and like, why don't you go reshoot it? And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll reshoot it, and then he just showed them the same scene. They're like, okay, it's fine.
That's badass. That's when you can do whatever you want, and anytime someone gives you shit. Just
late in his career, right?
Right,
he could.
Point. And
well, what it was is like, this is sort of the 60s started to dissolve the Hays Code, and it didn't fully get erased until sort of mid 1968, which is sort of how Night of the Living Dead kind of got through all of that censorship. But Hitchcock would always have these sort of famous battles with them over this stuff, and in this one, I guess, there's a lot of sort of legends about how he pulled this one off. But, it went in, very consciously of having to fight them over this stuff. Like, this is the first time an American movie has shown a toilet, let alone a toilet flushing in a movie. It's like, all that weird stuff from the Hays Code where it's like, people can't lay in the same bed and all this stuff. And that's why you have I Love Lucy, twin beds across
really?
across the room from one another and all that kind of stuff.
But how did they get little Ricky?
That's the stork delivered him.
I remember Storky. That was a good episode. Storky's a good character.
I gotta say, Psycho is a perfect example, as we've seen a bunch of Alfred Hitchcock movies during our pod. This is a great example of how he can mix humor and suspense and this horror. Especially some of those, the first girl that was working with Marion, the other administrative assistant, when she said, Teddy is furious when he found out I was taking tranquilizers. She was trying to give her tranquilizers to chill out. That'll really help you with your headache there.
Yeah. He was flirting with you. He must have noticed my wedding ring. Not that you're the world-class movie star beauty Janet Leigh, but...
I love the guy that she embezzled. I felt like he totally deserved it. Just the way he was...
he did.
Yeah, the way he was talking to her and throwing his cash down.
I declare. Well, I don't.
Yeah.
That's why I get to keep it all. That's what he said. That was a great line. But this guy came in in cash, which I'm sure is probably, I don't know, $500,000 at this point. But $40,000 in cash, this guy just dropped it off. And not even Janet Leigh's boss wanted to even to keep that in the office, said that was too dangerous. Maybe we can get a check from him later. But yeah, this guy was kind of a creep right off the bat, and I do agree with you, Adam. This guy did deserve to get his money taken away, especially for how he talked to Janet Leigh.
Yeah, no, he's asking to be stolen from, and he got what he deserved.
Well, it's this interesting thing that Hitchcock did throughout this movie of like finding ways to get you to sort of the audience on board with the motivations of a certain criminal, right? So think about that scene where it's like, okay, this guy's being really creepy. Janet Leigh's in a desperate situation, and she can't marry this guy who's having all these other problems, debt problems, and then his ex-wife and all this stuff. And then she finds this way to start over and break out of this thing, and you don't feel bad for the guy who's getting ripped off because he's such a creep. And then you're following her, and how is she going to do this stuff? And then we have that scene sort of in the parlor with the sandwiches and the birds and whatever, which kind of, you don't know it yet, I guess, the first time you're watching it, but that is to endear you to Norman. When he comes back to clean it up, because you don't know that he is Mother, or well, but you probably do, I guess, because it's like everybody, even if you haven't seen it, know he's the
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But
guys, I didn't even watch any of the movies. This is all new to me. I didn't prepare for Ed Gein. Yeah. I didn't watch the movies.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Who's
Thanks
Janet?
for coming, Adam.
You mean Jamie Lee Curtis's mother?
Wasn't she in The Fog?
With Jamie Lee?
Yeah.
No, I guess they went to The Fog together, right?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. Janet Leigh's, the old lady in the movie.
And H2O.
Right.
Janet Leigh's in H2O?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now I got to rewatch that.
Yeah. It's all over now.
I can't miss a Janet Leigh movie, guys.
I think you're right, though, Jeremy. He is brilliant at making you feel for Norman, and you're right. It's hard to watch this movie and forget about that he is the twist, and that is the twist that he is Mother, or Mother is him, and that she is eventually going to take over. But trying to forget that while you're watching it, you really do feel for this guy. You feel like he's too sheltered of a person. And you can tell that he doesn't have many social interactions.
Well, he's been abused too,
especially with that like private traps speech, where it's like, she's like, well, sometimes we all step into them inadvertently, and he's like, well, I was born into mine, and it's just like it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, he's clearly letting her know that he's been mentally and possibly physically abused by his mom.
We're all in our private traps, and none of us can ever get out.
Sometimes we deliberately step into those traps.
I was born in mine. I don't mind it anymore.
Oh, but you should. You should mind it.
Oh, I do. But I say I don't.
And that's him talking to her. And I think that's kind of what I was thinking about after watching this movie is, you find out that Mother would take over, 50% of the time of Norman's life, when by the end of it, she was taking over 100% of his psyche. But, those times when Norman is the one talking, you really do have a sense of like a different person there. And you don't really, again, it's hard to watch knowing what the twist is, but you do feel like he might be a normal person, at least at the beginning of the film.
It's possible.
Or 50 minutes into the film, I should say, because that's when you meet him. Yeah.
Part of it is the Norman side of his personality or whatever is sort of, pathetic and sympathetic. Yeah. And, you feel for him in a lot of ways. And then like the mother side of him is the psycho, right?
Right, exactly. We all go a little mad sometimes, Jared. Let's be a little bit more sensitive there, right?
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother, after all.
I wanted to bring up the scene where Janet Leigh Marion Crane finally makes it to the Bates Motel. And when she's driving in that car, and I know it's an effect that they did with the lights coming toward a stationary car with the water being hit with the windshield. It's still very effective. The effects that Hitchcock was using, the techniques were incredible.
Well, it was the score. It was the combination of the score as well. I love that.
Right, yeah. Oh, the music is Bernard Herrmann, amazing. When she's going from driving, she can't really see, And then all of a sudden it gets very muddy, not muddy, but wet on her windshield, and you can't see it all. And all of a sudden the Bates Motel just kind of appears there. And it's that big sign. Really reminded me of In the Mouth of Madness.
Yes.
When they're driving from the one town, or from the regular town, from the regular world into the Hobbs End town, and that kid on the bicycle. Just kept. It felt like the same thing. It was almost like she was like falling into a nightmare, and she ended up in hell, more or less, which was in this instance the Bates Motel nightmare.
It never rains at the Bates Motel.
I always forgot about that. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that. Like, because you're just so used to the. I have most of the movie kind of memorized, But it is interesting that like as she's driving at night in the rain and then pulls over into the motel, it's like there is kind of a lot of traffic out there. It's like it's supposed to be this sort of deserted highway. But I mean, but yeah, there's cars behind her.
Remember, she doesn't even know where she is. She doesn't realize that she was off the highway.
And part of it is because she's like, frantically trying to like move away from the cop and kind of like,
remember, like, the beginning of the movie is of her being paranoid about stealing this money. Like this, we don't even know what's coming next.
Because there's the combination of, you've got the Bernard Herrmann score that's starting to pulse really hard,
Bum,
and that
bum,
the
bum.
voiceover in her head of all the different people that are going to find her out when she, either turns herself in, or the conversation that she's having in her head of her boss talking to Cassidy and being, that conversation she hears. So there's like this really hard sense of paranoia.
I can't believe she did that. She was flirting with me.
And then she smirks when she thinks about that. Like she's like, maybe I did a good thing. It's a really, really awesome scene.
I want to know, how did they get the music from Reanimator for this film? How did they make that happen?
That is the same score, right? Like, it's so similar. It might be off by like one.
But how did they get the rights to the music from Reanimator when it was
that's
in the
how it
past?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Blows my
It was a
mind.
time machine.
Wow. Alfred Hitchcock could do anything.
He's a time
Adam.
traveler. He's a time traveler.
Exactly.
No, but also like just part of that, going back to the parlor scene a little bit, and Anthony Perkins, like, I mean,
Want some sandwiches?
His performance is just so amazing in this movie, and he does sort of balance that like sympathetic, and then the sort of like the really like dark roiling madness underneath. But it's like it's hard to tell at first that's there, because you just think it's part of his like antisocial sort of behavior. But it's like, you think about like the casting choices, like if he had been cast more like Ed Gein, or like more like the Norman from the novel, where he's kind of described more like the family in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or like
really?
more kind of like Leatherface a little bit, where he's like just overweight, just like a messy, kind of disgusting guy. It's like, just like in Texas Chainsaw, where everyone's like, oh, should we pick up that hitchhiker? No, he looks like a freak. It's like, because Anthony Perkins doesn't look like a freak, because he's, just so handsome and like so unassuming, and,
more of a Ted Bundy type.
So tame. Yeah, exactly. Like, it becomes all the more, scary, and you could sympathize with him when you first meet him.
That's a good point. It is like Ted Bundy, because he was unassuming. He was
a
decent-looking person.
He wore a bow tie and drove a VW Bug. Like, he was a yuppie, dude.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's this... it just blew me away. How much... You don't even know what's coming in the first act. You have no clue. It's a completely different movie.
You were so invested in that story of like of the sort of pulp story of her stealing this money and doing that whole thing.
That's the first act of the movie. It's a completely different film. And then you get this horror slasher in the second act, and you get this kind of investigation that kind of rolls into both in the third. You're almost watching three different films.
I think you're right in that is how the acts are broken up, but you almost get 3 full acts from Marion Crane's story alone,
right?
And then it starts her sister and the investigation with Loomis to try to go find her.
Sam Loomis, yeah. Or as my Halloween costume was, Jumis.
I think we lost Brian.
Very proud moment for me.
I know we keep going back to the parlor thing, but there was something that Norman says in there that I think totally solidifies what you're saying, Jeremy. Is he couldn't say the word bathroom when he was showing her his room or her room. There was he could show her anything that was in there.
There.
Yeah,
Or
he
whatever.
couldn't even say, and I don't think he even said it. I think
He
she
didn't.
said it, and yeah,
He didn't.
and I think that just completely goes along with his
and,
character.
and that's interesting because that part of it is sort of this that thing that Eileen pointed out when we were talking about the Gothic ghosts thing, about how like this movie took the idea of that sort of Victorian that Gothic house and mashed it up against the modern with that hotel. And then you see the parlor as sort of like this weird brackish area in between, where it's like it's sort of a Victorian parlor inside of a mid 20th century motel, and that aspect of it is very much like sort of the pulling of the two opposing forces in Norman's mind, right? It's like it's sort of manifested that way.
Wow, that's great. And that room, that parlor is so damn scary. Those shots, especially the way that it is filmed. That one where there's a giant owl looming over the scene, and it fills the frame so beautifully. And then the other one is
a man's
like
hobbies are supposed to pass the time, not fill it.
not fill it. Yeah.
It's all he has.
But he did kind of remind me of the Buffalo Bill character, because the Buffalo Bill was also a specialist. He was in this instance a tailor and an ethnologist. I think they call that a bug expert.
Bug guy.
You're a great big fat girl.
I would fuck me.
So that's interesting. So in the book Psycho, he was more like Norman was more like Leatherface. He was more of just like a quiet, you said oafish type, or
oafish and sweaty and gross, and it's like and it's like if as a sort of a masterstroke to get the audience to like switch gears for who they're following and not even notice it, like you cast Anthony Perkins in that role, and all of a sudden like it takes on a fully different set of characteristics.
He's almost the
audience is, like,
protagonist
behind this guy.
Once that part, and he has to take care of everything. Suddenly, he's the protagonist of the film, whether you like it or not.
then you really feel for him, right? Because he's cleaning up his mom's mess.
Right.
that she
Yeah.
was
Right.
making.
Yeah. So, in an effort to hide a crime, he's actually kind of the good guy now. It's really weird.
Yeah, and what's kind of cruel with that is like that Hitchcock makes the audience a participant in that crime, a party to
Right.
it.
An accessory to murder.
Accessory. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this movie has so many different genres within it. Being a horror, being psychological horror, being a detective film, a missing persons film, all that. I think that it's just so successful on so many levels, and the way that it looks still, it's just so beautiful.
Oh man, yeah. The
Unbelievable.
cinematography is amazing. Like especially that shot where I think it's either Sam. I think it's when Sam comes out the first time to like by himself without Vera Miles,
And he sees Norman.
and he's like, Norman, hello. And, he's looking for the other guy. What's his name?
Arbogast.
He's like, Arbogast.
Yeah.
And we see Anthony Perkins on the edge of that swamp, having just dumped Arbogast in there.
Exactly, in
But-
all black
but,
at this time. Yeah.
It's kind of a 3/4 overhead, and then it's like pushing in on his face, and like there's barely an eye light there, and it's just this.
That was kind of the moment, I
shot.
think, where the movie said, "Hey, there might be something up with this guy." Just giving those hints to the audience,
Right.
and that was that turning point for Norman, I think.
That was probably the turning point where Norman had to really turn on the side of him that could control both things, knowing that, all right, now I'm under a real threat. I killed the first person, I killed the next one, but now there's someone else showing up, I'm screwed.
Well, because he has Norman would be cleaning up a mess that he as mother was masterminding,
Right.
And so he had to kind of bring those together, and I think that's when you start seeing, more of instead of the 50-50, the 75 mother taking over to 25 Norman,
Right.
and then she was trying to handle stuff, and then by the end it's again all mother.
It's all mother.
with the fly on her face or the fly on her hand and everything. Oh, man. I wouldn't even hurt a fly.
I love that. I love that so much. No, but I what's funny? Like I think the scene that like gets a lot of criticism is the like, oh, let's
Yeah.
explain everything at the end, right?
We talked about
But
that
I-
in Gothic Ghosts.
Yeah, I really like that scene, and I
do
like
too.
the guy. He is the sort of the movie's Hannibal Lecter in a way,
Yes.
and like it's like,
Yeah.
and you can imagine off screen he's doing the same shit Hannibal is. I don't
He's
know, we'll
eating
see.
people.
but like
That's where they make mistakes. They leave their victims. That's
I do
really
it
how,
the
yeah.
right way.
I eat them
Yeah, I
all.
do it the smart
You'll
way.
have to check my poop. Because he does, like, guy has like a radio announcer voice, right? Like, after this, and this report is brought to you by Michelin Tires.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I could see where people would complain about that, only because it's very expository in a movie that does so well just speaking cinematically.
It
but
does.
This one, I think it was very important to describe or to explain exactly what was going on, because it is pretty confusing at the end, especially for a first time seeing that. As Norman coming out with a dress and a wig on, you're like,
Oh,
okay,
this,
so
how many left turns
What's
are there in
happening?
this
Yeah.
movie? He's wearing a wig and a dress. What the hell?
I was thinking back to the Gus Van Sant, the remake movie of this. I don't know if you guys saw the remake of this.
Never did.
But
no.
I think when they're walking through that when Marion's sister's walking through that taxidermied bird room that Norman's got, I think they really upped the
parlor.
bird ante in the Gus Van Sant movie. I think there were a lot more birds.
There's a pterodactyl in there.
It's animatronic, like they move. There's like lights and shit in their eyes, and it shoots out smoke like a cheap toy.
So you did see it.
Yeah.
Anything else with Psycho before we visit the Sawyer family?
I will say this about the last scene. I don't think we get the scene where the mother does the voiceover and he's looking at the fly and says, I wouldn't even kill that fly. We don't get that scene without the expository doctor scene.
I think you're right.
We don't get
Exactly.
that. So
Yeah.
I think okay, so it's fine. It's expository, whatever, but it sets up another landmark classic scene shot in a movie.
Now, I'm wondering how effective that movie would have been had it skipped the psychiatrist explaining Norman's situation and just went right to Norman in there with the voiceover. I'm just wondering. I don't think it would be effective.
I don't think it would, because I don't think you needed to connect the dots.
Yeah.
And you just, it is expository, but even, remember, again, like, he's wearing a dress now. Like, they just hadn't quite connected that yet to me.
Right.
It also it filled out some of that world there a little bit. You know, we had a lot of stuff with like, oh, Green Lawn Cemetery and whatever, and like. And then the some of the missing persons cases or whatever were sort of tied into this, and
the nasty thing that happened there at the motel back when, 10 years ago. Yeah.
There's a lot of history down that road.
Down that road. Don't go down that
Don't
road.
go down that road. We're having fun. We're having a lot of fun today, guys.
Anything else from Psycho before we move on to Leatherface and the gang?
no, I'm sure I'll think of something later, and like, oh wait, let's go back. I'm good to.
We'll fix that
dig
in
into
post.
Texas Chainsaw. Yeah.
Well, like I said before, that I hadn't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre in its entirety in a very long time, and rewatching this, I forgot how scary it is. It's really well done. It's still very effective, and not only that, but I always think back to this movie, and I know people talk about it as feeling like a documentary feel, and it was almost like a home movie, and almost like an original found footage in a way, but I completely disagree with that now, especially after watching it again. While it does have that old washed out film look about it and graininess,
Yeah.
it is still very well composed. There are incredibly great shots there.
Yeah.
Some of the tracking shots of the girls walking into
think of that
the
moment,
house.
like right
Yeah.
after, like the guy, we first see Leatherface.
Yes.
We cut back to the woman on the little swing.
Yes.
We start underneath the swing.
It
she
pulls
gets off
back
the swing,
underneath.
and we push in with her walk to the house. I mean, that shot was amazing.
Amazing. And it was like, how the hell did they get the camera under there?
Wait, you're saying you
and
can't
how
get
did
that
they
with the
push-
Super 16 film camera?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't get landmark tracking shots with a little handheld mini DV camera, guys?
Exactly. Well, I think that maybe misconception comes from like the way that people don't have a good way to describe the feeling of it, because the movie is grainy, right, and it is with some of the really ultra wide lenses inside of the van at the beginning or whatever, like there is something that feels kind of documentary in that sense. Or we're in the house and they have a handheld wide angle on some of those bones and this thing or that thing, and so like that part of it reminds people of documentaries. But you're right. I mean, there are so many other like sort of staged and well composed and really well put together sequences and moments and shots and whatever, that like it's not the same thing as a documentary style per se.
And masterfully edited, especially in these chase scenes, specifically when Franklin gets his ass kicked in the chair and gets the chainsaw to the belly, which again, that's one of those things where people are like, oh, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's all blood and guts. It's not really. It's filmed from behind, that reverse angle of the chainsaw going in, and you see Franklin die. And when Mary? Is that her name? Sally, sorry. When Sally takes off, and then
Marilyn
Leatherface
is the actor, if that's what you're thinking of.
Marilyn, yeah. When Sally takes off and Leatherface is coming after her through that forest, they are chopping in and out of between her and running, a close-up of him running, a close-up of her running, and it's so fast. It feels so current, and it's like, again, giving me goosebumps right now, but very, very effective chase scene, and they probably went 20 feet. When you think about the production of it.
Yeah. No, they would reuse shots for sure. If they could just get a different, few seconds of it, but it would be the same shot and just composed that way.
Watching this again, I was kind of, I was brought back to the fact that Leatherface is your killer for most of this movie. And you feel like it's this guy with a human face on his head in his house alone until... Sally makes her way away from him, away from the house, or away from Leatherface, and then ends up back at the gas station / barbecue joint with Mr. Sawyer, the barbecue professional, that brings her right back to the house. And then all of a sudden, you go from one killer to 4, including Grandpa.
Right.
And Grandpa.
Right, Grandpa.
And Grandpa, what the hell is Grandpa?
I thought that guy was dead the first time he saw him.
His grandma and Grandpa are sitting together, and Grandma is
Right.
clearly dead, but Grandpa is hanging on by a thread only because they keep feeding him finger blood.
Well, and this is how we connect the movie. So Grandpa is actually the kid from In the Mouth of Madness. Grandma is actually the body from...
Kind of the same makeup.
Yeah, Grandma is the dead body of Norman Bates' mother from Psycho. This is how we get all the movies come together.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah.
This is why you're back on this show, Adam.
Thank you for my wily insights on the reuse of characters and props and time travel.
This movie has some of the best slasher movie kills of all time.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say from Kirk, I believe Kirk is the first one that gets it. He's the one that takes the hammer to the head right off the bat. That's the first time you see Leatherface.
The synthesizer door.
Pam takes the meat hook. She's the one that's placed on a meat hook. Again, it's really well done. You don't see anything. It's like you see her going up, meat hook, and then she goes on, lands on it. You don't see the blood. It's really well done. And everyone else gets it pretty bad too. I mean, the one fella or one girl, I think, gets stuck in a freezer, and then obviously Franklin gets the chainsaw right to the belly, which is just intense. But again, this is honestly, it's one of the most shocking movies, and they don't really show too much, and it's still one of a big shocker even to this day.
Everything about it holds up. Like absolutely everything about it. It's as scary as anything you can see today. It has elements of the way that they don't make movies anymore. A lot of elements of the way that they do make movies, because people steal a lot of stuff from this one, particularly the use of a chainsaw in a horror film. Like that's this movie's thing. And when you think about it, like it's such a simple addition to it, and it's so pervasive nowadays. It's in a lot of horror movies. The chainsaw is just an element, but this is literally called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're not shorting you on what you're getting. It's very descriptive.
No, not at all.
This ain't a rom-com. You know what I mean? Yeah. they aren't going to kiss and make up at the end unless like they're putting their lips on the chainsaw itself. But that's a different film.
But it starts out, they have it feels very real. It feels like you're getting a report from a narrator of a documentary. In this case, John Larroquette in an uncredited role of the voice of the narrator. Talking about this crazy moment in history of the annals of history.
The West Wing season 1's John Larroquette?
I was thinking more of the Night Court.
Oh,
John
yes.
Larroquette,
I love Night Court. I love that show.
So you got Dan Fielding telling you about this nasty business with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Sally and her invalid brother. And then you are right into this dead body sculpture that, again, is a beautiful shot. It's like a crane shot that starts at the head, and then you see the full reveal of this strange thing.
By the way, has anyone ever heard the strobe of a flash from a photograph, a camera, ever make that sound before? That
But that sound made the movie.
It did.
Like that was like the iconic sound from that movie. That's all you know.
When they put out the remake, that was the ad. Like that was
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
used almost as like a percussive tone throughout the entire commercial.
Yeah, which made sense because it brought me right back.
Right. No, it's a complete reminder that this is what we're watching.
In this one, do we get Leatherface's name? I don't think so, right?
No, but they do say Leatherface. We don't get the hitchhiker's name, but he says Leatherface and me when he's talking. Yeah, I know, I heard that too, but no, they don't call him Bubba because I think his name is Bubba in other versions of it. Yeah.
But they do say the name Leatherface. Like that's the part they say. Okay.
Yeah, Leatherface is the only one that actually gets a name. I don't even think
Grandpa.
Grandpa gets a name too, exactly. God, that's such a fun scene when she finally breaks out and Grandpa's taking those swings, like trying to hit him with the hammer. And when she busts out of that window,
hand, trying to do it.
Get her, Grandpa, get her.
He can hit him with one stroke, and it's like
Takes him like
hand,
7.
dropping the hammer.
He finally got a good one in there.
I love when she jumps out of the window. I think that's just so like superhero heroic. She's badass.
Well, the thing is that you are in this hell
Right.
of this household, and you don't know it yet. But it is night. It's daytime outside
Yeah,
now.
because doesn't she like jump out from the second story?
yeah, the first time that
and
they're
then
chasing her.
come back to the gas station, and then get pulled into the.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
She made her way back
it's
up.
2
Yeah, this is
times.
the second time when she jumped out, and it was.
She jumped out of glass 2 times. She jumped out of glass 2 times.
But that's when we see the hitchhiker get nailed by that semi, and that's a great kill.
Fantastic.
Man.
How much did you feel bad for the semi-truck driver? Also, like, why didn't they just drive away?
Where the hell did he go? He just kept running, and he was kind of a big boy. I'm like, he's not going to get very far.
Yeah,
Leatherface coming after him.
He's got better cardio than Leatherface, okay? So that's all you need.
We should be happy that he's getting his exercise and he's just getting in his steps. He's doing his part. He wants to be a better person.
That sounds like a great app for like a workout system. It's like you hire some serial killer to chase you with a chainsaw. You'll burn a lot of calories.
You don't have to be that fast. You just have to be faster than the guy with the chainsaw.
So obviously our relation to Ed Gein in this would be the bone sculptures, the lamps, the furniture, all of the human remains that are created into different household items.
right.
They had a
Very
lot
useful.
of taxidermy in this one as well, right? I mean,
Yeah, there were
Yes.
definitely stuffed birds everywhere.
not just the I guess the human taxidermy stuff, but like also some of the birds and whatever else.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there was
Psycho.
a bunch of them, and it seemed like they were not only creating taxidermied birds, but they were also combining those with other things to make art out of it. And the production design in this was just so fucking good that when they
Right.
would do those little
So
close-ups and
memorable, too,
inserts of
yeah.
all the stuff, you're just like, how the fuck
Yeah,
did
the
they
shot
make
of the
that?
bench. That
The
scared the
bench
shit
is
out of me.
exactly. It looks like a throne of bones.
Right.
It's like, wow, is that cool?
How much?
Yeah, this is a good one. This is a really good movie. I don't think I could ever get tired of watching
No,
this. And
never slows down once it starts. It's much like Psycho.
No,
like
it does
once
not.
once it puts the foot to the gas, it does not let up.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, this one, maybe we'll get to this a little later, but I felt like out of the three, like, was sort of the odd man out or whatever. Like, you don't get to know any of these characters or whatever the way, or the pathology of anybody the way you do with the other two films.
Correct.
Where you really get to know sort of everyone. In this one, you're like rolling down a hill, and it's just like,
Yeah.
until you get to the bottom, essentially.
And the only narration that we get that would give us anything is at the beginning, as opposed to at the middle or at the end, the way that the other two films were.
Right. And it's funny, it's like, it takes like, I don't know what, like, the movie is 80 minutes long or something, right? But like, it takes about 45 of those minutes to get that first Leatherface kill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or possibly a little more. But, the movie starts off with such a hit of horror with like the flash bulbs, and then, pulling out of that, the corpse sculpture in the graveyard up there, that you're now all of a sudden just anticipating it for that first, I don't know what, like 35, 40 minutes after that.
Right. But they've already like chilled you out a little bit in that 30 minutes because it's just a bunch of people hanging out in a van.
Right.
And then
you're like, well, how's it going to happen? How's it going to happen? What's
Right.
going to happen? Yeah.
And it's similar to the shower scene in Psycho. It happens right around the middle of the film. When you when everything turns, right there is kind of somewhere in that halfway point.
Well, yeah,
God.
and I wonder, if it's, if it kind of lulls you. I mean, like obviously you know something's coming, but like
And the hitchhiker is still intense.
you don't
Right.
kind of see the the hammer coming until it happens.
But the way that they shot Leatherface of, Kirk like kind of looking up and seeing Leatherface, and they almost like zoomed in like a tilt up at him, and you just see him with the hammer, and it's really slow, and then he comes down on him. It is like one of the scariest moments in a movie. And then when that door closes, it's still when I first saw that as a kid, it scared the shit out of me. When I had to pause that, man. When the door closed, I was done. I was like, no.
I'm never watching TV again. I'm out. This is.
I hate horror movies now. and then you changed your life. It changed your life.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about it on a podcast. Yay!
I'd say Leatherface is a little bit different than Buffalo Bill or Hannibal Lecter, and the fact that he does not speak and has pretty much zero intelligence. Although he seems pretty handy around the house and handy around
He's
all the tools.
quite the
and things that he needs
carpenter.
to use.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very very talented with his woodwork.
Or bone work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he definitely feeds the most. He's the most slasher villain of the other two. As much as like
Right.
Norman Bates dressed as his mom is definitely like the germane person in that lineup. When you think of like it's funny how this is a 70s movie, but you still think of Leatherface with that 80s cadre of horror characters.
Yeah,
Especially
that's
because
a
the
good point.
sequels
He's
are
with
there.
He's with Freddy and
He
Jason.
is. He is.
Yeah,
But similarly,
yeah.
how Michael Myers is because there were more Halloween movies in the 80s than in the 70s. There were more Texas Chainsaws in the 80s and the 70s. So I see how that follows up, especially with the sequels.
Because the sequel came out in the 80s,
Right, 86.
Oh, so I mean it was 12 years after the first
Right.
one. Mm-hmm. Right, 74 for the Texas. Yeah,
Have you ever
I mean,
seen
that's,
Next Generation with...
we had a podcast about it.
TN
That's right, TNG, that's right. I knew
horror
that's why.
movies that went off the rails, and boy, I wanted to bring that up. Thanks for bringing that up. That movie has nothing on this one.
But isn't...
But it ends the same way. It's like a Leatherface in the sun, and
Yes or no? Yes or no? McConaughey's actually pretty good. In spite of how whack job that fucking movie is.
he is nuts. That's for
He
sure.
plays crazy. He
He's
plays
like,
crazy.
I can
really
do
well.
crazy, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But man, think of how Ted Levine does crazy, and think of how Anthony Perkins does crazy, and
Right.
it's like how much scarier those versions of crazy was. What I didn't know when we watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre TNG, what was that like the guy who wrote and directed TNG, the part 4, was the co-writer of and co-producer of the first movie, Kem Henkel.
Oh.
Which blows my mind.
Well,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't always bat 1,000, gentlemen. Sometimes you strike out looking on 3 pitches.
Well, as it turns out, like he didn't want to do the movie, and he was like roped into it, and you can kind of tell. He's like, yeah, okay, well, I'll do this.
it was one of those 6-packs.
You guys want to get an extra take? No, one's good. I think we can shut it down for the night.
For protection? What's to protect? It was perfect.
Exactly.
So we can move on to Silence of the Lambs or the Screaming of the Lambs, depending on which one you want to talk about first. Directed by Jonathan Demme, who also directed Stop Making Sense, the Talking Heads music video, live music video, which is one of the coolest music videos ever. This movie shares a lot of the cinematic sensibilities, I feel, that a music video does, in that it plays visual before it plays expository. And this movie fucking rocks. Let's just put it out there. Rewatching this one, I forgot how good this movie was, and it is incredibly good.
It's funny that you mentioned the shot selection being very much like a music video. I think a lot of the shot selection takes its cues from the Psycho. Specifically, how many head-on shots there are, how many shots there are of the characters looking into the camera. POV. That's very much a Jonathan Demme style. It showed up a lot in his movie Philadelphia a couple years after this.
It is literally Clarice Starling's point of view throughout this film. Whenever we get a new location, it's her scanning the room, it's her looking around, finding out where we're at, and I agree with you.
A lot of...
And then those straight-on shots.
Yeah, the straight-on shots of Janet Leigh, the ones of the detective, the ones of Norman at the end of the movie. Or as Clarice, and then you have Anthony Hopkins' character, Hannibal Lecter, looking at the camera a lot because he's talking to her. Those, and even like Scott Glenn's character, the FBI head of the department, they're always looking at the camera. And that's a Jonathan Demme thing. He does that in a lot of his films, and straight out of the Psycho, and I love that.
Yeah, also that the intensity and the shallowness of the focus on those POV shots. Yeah, it really reminded me of some of those shots in Possession, Brian, when we were talking about that a couple weeks ago, and it was like, when Sam Neill would just like look down the barrel of the camera, and Isabella and Johnny would do the same thing. And yeah, and it's used to such like great effect in this, like you're saying, Adam. It's like it really, it sucks you into those moments, especially when she's confessing about her past and all those other things.
There's an intensity to it. Again, the way that you describe the focus, there's nothing else to look at in the shot. And they do that intentionally to force you to look at their eyes and then hear the stories that they're describing, the horrible pain that everyone's gone through. It draws you in and it builds you up to what you're going to get a roller coaster feel later in the film. But until then, you just have to listen to what it could look like, but you have to just listen to what it sounds like. It's funny that you just say that there's not a whole lot of exposition in this film. There is and there isn't. I think that there is, but it's so crafted well that you really are hearing people describe themselves as opposed to what's happened A to B to C, but things that have happened themselves in the past that inform their choices, that why they're here.
I think this movie starts off similar to, we were talking about, recently we did a show on Gothic horror films, and we included The Shining in there as one of them. And The Shining kind of hits you over the head right off the bat with, that horror, that big music that's pumping, and then the credits look strange. And I feel like they did that with Silence of the Lambs too. They're like an inverted credit, and it just is kind of, it's different from what you're used to, and it's like, it just makes you question right off the bat what you might be getting into. And I thought that just as bringing up like something similar to The Shining that we had just seen. So that was interesting.
A simple way to make something intense. A simple way to make someone feel like this isn't right. And that's
with again a great score behind it, and it all comes together really beautifully.
Yep.
So she's Starling. Clarice is trying to get into the behavioral sciences department at the FBI with Scott Glenn's character, and I can't think of his name right now.
Jack Crawford,
yeah. I love his character, and I love how she really owns who she is, even if she is just getting done with training. I feel like she portrayed this well, and I think Jodie Foster deserved every bit of recognition for her role. Or her acting in this role, because it is brilliant and very believable.
It's the best. This is one of those films, I think you probably know this, but for the listeners, this is the film that won all 5 of the major Academy Awards: Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, and Screenplay. And specifically Foster, everyone always says that Hopkins is like the man of this film because he's only in it for a few minutes. So really, it's Foster that does a lot of the load bearing. She's carrying this film a lot, and she kills it. And that's the reason why, there was no question who was going to win the awards this year. This was far and away the best film of that year. As much as we say Psycho and Texas Chainsaw are sort of standard bearers for the horror genre, this is the one that actually got the horror genre over the line, where it was like, this is the best movie of 1991. There is no argument about it on every facet. And it's a horror movie, and it's fantastic.
It's absolutely a horror movie. It is 100% a horror movie that includes horror icons. Roger Corman plays a role in this. George Romero's in it at one point. It's like, obviously,
George
Jonathan...
Romero's in it? I missed that.
So when Lecter is transported to go meet the senator...
In that little hangar...
Exactly. At one point, there's a group of fellas that walk away from him. He's in his muzzle and all that. And Romero is one of the people in the group, like, just walking away with people.
Yeah.
It's like Jonathan Demme was like, yeah, we need all my favorites. Come on, let's go. Get in here.
Yeah.
Well, because, Jonathan Demme got his start with Corman.
But Corman's got a line.
Yeah, he tells the hot yogurt joke, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah.
Oh, wait, no, Roger, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Philadelphia. He's in Philadelphia. Roger Corman makes an appearance in Philadelphia.
Roger Corman's the guy that basically says, oh, did you guys make up some phony plea deal telling Lecter?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Jonathan Demme, started working for Roger, and like one of his first movies, like the Caged Heat or whatever, one of those things, the women in cages films.
Was it a prison, like a woman prison movie?
Yeah, exactly.
I miss exploitation
like
movies, don't you?
Yeah.
We will do a
Anyway.
block on those.
Fantastic. I can't wait to hear it.
This movie has so many elements that I love. Obviously, the horror and the violence and all that, but also it feels like an X-Files episode, especially when they go to talk to those bug
the
experts.
FBI.
Yeah, the guy with the cross eyes. He reminds me of the smoking gunman. The
lone gunman.
gunman.
Yeah.
The lone gunman.
Yeah.
Sorry, the smoking gunman. I put two of the characters together. The smoking man.
The smoking man.
There's
and the
three
lone-
smoking guys.
No, they're smoking out of a gun. You know, like how they smoke weed in Platoon, how he blows the weed smoke into the barrel of the shotgun. And again, a similar kind of thing. That shot is all head on. Those are all head on shots between Willem
Yeah, and
Dafoe.
he's just kind of looking at her. Would you like to get some dinner with me? Are you hitting on me, sir? Yeah, and he just goes, yes.
Would you like hamburgers and beer?
Yeah. I mean, that's a way to a girl's heart is hamburgers and beer.
There you go.
I think that this movie is so brilliantly made. I mean, there were things that made sense. Just the fact that he needed to find larger girls. He needed to starve them to stretch their skin in order to make leather.
14?
Are you a size 14?
And she's like, what? That part scares the hell out of me because it is so well done. Ted Levine looks like he can't get that thing up into his van.
Yeah.
And when he gets her in there, he's like, do you mind just stepping up in there real quick? I just want to make sure I can get it to the back.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And he's so sweet about it. And then he is just a nasty, nasty person. Dr. Chilton in this is very much Dr. Silverman from T2.
Oh, yeah.
He's the doctor that's just trying to get his career propelled by, studying Hannibal Lecter.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, he's a lot less subtle about it, too. He's like, that's
Exactly.
Chilton. CHIL. Baltimore can be a great town, especially for a FBI agent as attractive as you. It's like total creep.
I do like how Lecter gets Chilton at the end. I have to say, similar to how the guy in Psycho deserves to have his money stolen.
I remember that he ends up in the DR or whatever, but like I forgot he's like, I'm gonna have a friend for dinner, and then it like shows Chilton leaving the plane or whatever for the witness protection program or whatever that was.
And then the wig that Lecter had on at that point too, with that like Cuban hat on.
Yeah.
So good. But at one point, I don't know if you notice, if you watch it, while he's talking to Clarice, a fly lands on his face, just like in Psycho, and I'm like, oh shit, was that? I don't know if they planned that or what, but I mean, it was a happy
another
accident.
element, another thing. We're like, that's the shot.
I really love that ending. I think that it goes from like. The film ending, and it is Clarice that solves the case, that kills Buffalo Bill, right? That finds him. First of all, that sequence when you've got the FBI that are about to knock in the door, and you think that it's Buffalo Bill's house, but it's not. It's just Clarice going to see him, and they're in a completely different spot. I thought that was one of the hottest like edits in a movie. And then the movie ends again with Lecter coming back to kind of make his little final grand exit by saying, I'm going to go eat this guy now that's been an asshole to me for the last 10 years.
And then I'll go to Florence.
The Duomo.
There was also a shot of a fingernail in Bill's pit when the young I was like, that was Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Which is another Ed Gein
exactly.
thing. That's another, he would take fingernails off his victims.
But I think this one was like people trying to like climb up in it, and they lost it in the wall. Pretty nasty.
What's so nuts is like there's that there are these really subtle moments where you see James Gumm's little living quarters in the basement there, and he has this quilt over his bed with swastikas on it. And I wonder if that was like a part of the thing they were kind of like nodding to as well, like the sort of like type of thing that they were Nazis were experimenting on at one point of like the human lampshades and shit like that.
Wow.
What if it wasn't Nazis? Because then it's like one more thing to add. Like, what if it was like actually like kind of like a woke statement? Like he was like freedom to these people who are oppressed, and then also I kill people. So like it would have really made people really ask and question who they were, because it's like Nazis. Now I really hate this guy. You know?
Exactly.
Like you weren't so sure until you saw that. Now he's an anti-Semite, so now he's evil. But what if it was different? What if the guy, again, because he thinks he wants the sex change, so what if he's like a trans rights person, and then it kind of like, whoa, okay, interesting, he's woke now.
Well, they did actually, address that in this.
Yeah.
Lecter talks about how he thinks he is, just in the point of like, is he or isn't he transsexual? And the idea is that he's not.
Oh, he is not. No, yeah.
That's fascinating. I missed that part.
He wasn't eligible for the surgeries or whatever. But like,
oh, interesting.
I think this is right around the time where Sterling is promising Lecter the island. Right?
Yeah.
The Anthrax Island or whatever.
Anthrax Island. Yeah.
He lays out the psyche of Buffalo Bill, and it's because he had analyzed this guy, and it's just this like massive coincidence that this is the case.
Right.
But he was able to sort of like inform the audience that James Gumb believes he's transsexual and that he's going to do this transformation on his own. But that's not what that is.
Because his transformation was going to be through the skin and the suit of the woman that he was building around him.
Right.
That
it's
was
rooted in having to murder lots of people to accomplish it. There's nothing.
But then that's also where all the Death's Head moths came from, right? That series of transformation that they also would go through. That was his version of that, his cocoon. And I thought that was such an amazing parallel between the two. And I think that it's interesting that he's in many ways an expert. Buffalo Bill was kind of a genius in many ways. Being an expert with the, I know it's odd to say, but human leather, if you will. It's a talent.
Manual sewing machine.
Hey, I'm Buffalo Bill. You can come on to my human emporium of human leather. Come on down Saturday. We got half off.
Handcrafted human leather.
I took half off for body, half off prices, half off everything.
It's just like the Texan Beetlejuice voice.
Chew on a dog.
Which again circles us back to the guy with the money at the beginning of Psycho. It's the same guy.
There you go.
This was the first time that I did, and I hadn't seen this in a long time either, but the Screaming of the Lambs discussion with Clarice's dream that she was kind of opening up to Hannibal Lecter. Now, I was kind of confused if Clarice was kind of like faking him out because she was very smart. She understood who Lecter was, and she knew that she could play into his ego as being a very intelligent person. And I felt like at one time she was telling him something that he wanted to hear, like a dream that would, kind of feed into that. But I think that was legit, but I might have been confused from the original time I saw it to this one.
I mean, I guess, it is possible because we do see how she, outsmarts him at certain points.
Yeah.
But like, it's not presented as we're supposed to question that. It is presented that like that's supposed to be what happened.
That's why we're given dream sequences early from her too.
Right. Her dad did die. So we do kind of know that part. I mean, and her brief stint with her aunt in Montana or whatever. This is supposed to be the explanation, and then also it kind of like is this like insight into her, like why she's so driven to do this thing, because she's trying to battle her own demons and think that this is going to help solve that,
right? And like impress her father, right? And that's what
that too.
Crawford tells her at the end, your dad would be very proud of you, and I think that was a big moment for her.
Everyone's trying to accomplish something that they don't quite have. It's the motivation of Buffalo Bill. It's the motivation of Clarice Starling. It's the motivation in some ways of Dr. Lecter of getting out. Of everyone's trying to change their surrounding in some way, their lot in life with their choices.
Oh yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm really glad we got to go down this rabbit hole of these three films that you'd think would be. You wouldn't think that they have a lot in common beyond like their basic plot points, but they really have a lot in common even deeper than that. The scores, the shot selection, different characters showing up to do similar things.
Each movie has a taxidermied owl in it, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Human heads preserved in all three of them.
Well, two of these movies actually had people wearing other people's faces on their face.
Yeah.
So that was a nice consistency. But,
or dressing in someone
right.
else's clothing,
Right.
it's really a I didn't think that these three films would have that much in common. Again, beyond the very basic understanding that it's all the same character, the person that they were based on.
I mean, I thought Buffalo Bill by the end, when he started putting on like part of the suit that he was making, it felt like Leatherface, or he was starting to become...
Yeah. Like you could argue that was the most Ed Gein of all the things that we had seen. And beyond that, not really. Before, it's more the investigation of that character, where you could see maybe we saw more of the character in Psycho or in Texas Chainsaw. But now that was the most head-on. This is that guy. This is who he is. This is what he did.
So with the Ed Gein connection, I remember we were talking about, like, he had skin lamps and slippers and whatever else he made. But did he make the face mask type of thing?
Masks made from the skin of female heads.
Yeah.
A corset made from a female torso, skin from shoulders to waist. Leggings made from human skin.
One of his killers was actually named Mary Hogan, and he kept her skull and he made her face into a mask, specifically her.
Hey Ed, can you put some pants on? Let me put on some jeans. You mean blue jeans? No, these are jeans legs. Jean, from next door. Put on a couple of jeans.
I'm gonna go put on my hairier legs. It's getting warm outside.
Are you and you are Sergeant Pembry?
All right, gents. I think we've just about covered all of the human skin we can for the day.
This is fantastic. This has been so much fun. I'm so glad I got to watch these old classic movies all over again. And thanks for having me on and exploring our favorite parts of this cinefantastique. That's what the word is. Cinefantastique.
Cinefantastique, yeah.
Thanks for setting this block up, Adam. To recap, we watched Psycho from 1960, Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, and Silence of the Lambs from 1991.
Three completely different eras of films, by the way. That was probably my favorite part of all of this. These are three very different moments in the movie making, and you could see, as much as they have in common, you could see their differences as well, and that's what I really loved about this.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how still sort of buttoned up things were in 1960. Versus the very next film where everything's t-shirts and jeans and overalls and shit, and you really just see these really distinct eras there. It's pretty great.
Adam, thank you so much for joining us again. We would love for you to help pitch yourself, promote yourself. What do you got going on? How would you like us to follow?
You can follow me on all socials at Adam Feuerberg, Feuerberg. It's a fun last name to spell. That's why I had to do it for you now. Also, every Saturday at 6 o'clock, I have a show on Facebook Live called Adam Cuts Fruit, where I cut a piece of fruit. My wife Rachel holds the camera and judges me all throughout. And really, Fritzy, our dog, is the star of the show. So if you want to see a cute little dog followed by my wife berating me and fearing for my fingers.
Give me back that goddamn dog.
It puts it back in the fucking basket.
Give me back my dog.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to come see Fluffy, come check us out. 6 o'clock every Saturday, Facebook Live. Thanks again for having me. This is super fun. What a great block of movies you got to watch today.
Thank you so much for listening. Next week, we're going to be watching and talking about a block of Brooks films. These are films written by fellas named Brooks.
Absolutely genius. I love this
Jeremy.
idea.
Jeremy, what are we watching?
Well, this is it's going to be guest programmed. This is from our buddy Sam Kimbrell. Came up with this block. Wanted to talk about sort of comedy film creators in the sort of late 20th century and how they sort of shaped our comedy today. And he picked out 3 movies that exemplify that. And these guys all happen to be have the last name Brooks.
So we're going to be watching 1974's Young Frankenstein. I'm just realizing that came out the same year as Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. There you
go. Lost in America from 1985, the Albert Brooks classic, hilarious movie. And then the Simpsons movie from 2007. So we've got Mel Brooks, Albert Brooks, and James L. Brooks as our Brooks block. I
love of all the James L. Brooks movies, he picked the Simpsons movie. That's wonderful. I haven't seen that in a long time, but I do love that movie.
Yeah,
it's really
good.
Well,
it is really good.
I think it's like a way to kind of cheat in the Simpsons TV show.
Sure, which is his greatest accomplishment.
For sure.
For as accomplished as James L. Brooks is, Simpsons is the crown jewel. Same with Matt Groening. Everyone involved with that, absolutely.
Fantastic. So thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Make sure to listen and subscribe. Follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms, all at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
Bye.
They're probably watching me. Well, let them. They'll see, and they'll know, and they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.